In the summer of 1944, Adolf Hitler was fixated on one American name. Not Patton, not Bradley, not MacArthur. The man Hitler feared most had never led a bayonet charge, never commanded troops in the trenches, and had never fired a shot in anger during the First World War. His name was Dwight David Eisenhower. To many officers in the U.S. Army, Eisenhower seemed like an unlikely choice for supreme command. He was not a battlefield legend. He did not have a reputation for daring attacks or personal bravery under fire. He was known instead as a staff officer, calm, organized, diplomatic. The kind of general who wrote plans rather than led assaults. The Germans underestimated him at first. Hitler did not. Eisenhower's rise was anything but obvious. Born in Texas and raised in Kansas, he entered West Point in 1911 with no special distinction. He graduated in the middle of his class. When World War I broke out, Eisenhower was desperate to go to France. He never did. Instead, he spent the war training tank crews in Pennsylvania. For many officers, that would have ended any hope of future greatness. But Eisenhower learned something far more valuable than combat experience. He learned how armies were built, how logistics worked, and how egos destroyed cooperation. While others chased glory, Eisenhower studied coordination, the unglamorous machinery of modern war. Between the wars, he served under some of the most difficult personalities in the U.S. Army. Douglas MacArthur, George Patton, men with towering egos and explosive tempers. Eisenhower learned how to manage them without confronting them directly. He absorbed pressure, deflected conflict, and kept the machine moving. That skill would later prove decisive. When the United States entered World War II, George C. Marshall needed commanders who could think beyond divisions and corps. He needed someone who could command alliances, someone who could manage British generals, American politicians, French leaders, and competing military doctrines, all at once. Marshall chose Eisenhower. To the surprise of many senior officers, Eisenhower was rapidly promoted and sent to Europe. By 1943, he was appointed Supreme Commander of the Allied Expeditionary Force. His task was unprecedented: plan and execute the largest amphibious invasion in history. The Germans watched closely. German intelligence reports described Eisenhower not as a tactician, but as a coordinator. That worried Hitler. Germany had defeated brilliant tacticians before. What terrified Hitler was an enemy who could bring overwhelming force to bear at the exact moment of his choosing. Eisenhower did not seek the spotlight. He let others take it. George Patton, loud and aggressive, became the face of American aggression. Bernard Montgomery became the voice of confidence. Eisenhower stayed behind the scenes, listening, balancing, deciding, and misleading. By early 1944, Eisenhower was overseeing a deception campaign so vast that even many Allied commanders did not know the truth. Fake armies, fake radio traffic, fake landing craft. The Germans became convinced that the Allied invasion would strike at Pas-de-Calais. Hitler believed it. He believed it because Eisenhower allowed him to. Eisenhower understood something fundamental about Hitler's thinking. Hitler trusted patterns. He trusted logic. He trusted what made sense. Eisenhower fed him exactly that, a perfectly reasonable invasion plan that was completely wrong. When June approached, Eisenhower carried a burden no other American general had ever faced. If the invasion failed, the war in Europe could be lost. He prepared a short handwritten statement accepting full responsibility for failure. No speeches, no excuses, just responsibility. On June 6, 1944, the Allies landed in Normandy. And Hitler hesitated. He waited for Eisenhower's real attack, the one that never came. The fear was not of Patton's tanks or American soldiers on the beaches. The fear was of the man orchestrating everything from above, and this was only the beginning. Hitler's hesitation on June 6th was not an accident. It was the result of months of pressure applied by a commander the Germans could not read. Even as American troops fought and died on the beaches of Normandy, Hitler refused to release his armored reserves. Panzer divisions sat idle near Pas-de-Calais, waiting for the invasion Eisenhower had convinced them was still coming. German commanders argued. Reports piled up. The situation worsened by the hour. Hitler overruled them all. Eisenhower had anticipated this exact reaction. He understood that the German command system revolved around Hitler's personal judgment. If Hitler believed Normandy was a diversion, the German army would be paralyzed. Eisenhower didn't need to defeat the Wehrmacht tactically on day one. He needed to freeze it, and he did. Once the beachheads were secured, Eisenhower faced a different enemy, not Germany, but his own alliance. British and American generals clashed constantly. Montgomery demanded more resources. Patton pushed for rapid advances. French leaders demanded political recognition. Each believed his plan was the correct one. Eisenhower listened to all of them. Then he chose what served the coalition, not individual ambition. This infuriated many commanders. Eisenhower was accused of lacking aggression, of moving too slowly, of failing to exploit breakthroughs. Critics argued that a more daring general could end the war faster. Hitler disagreed. German intelligence reports increasingly focused on Eisenhower personally. They noted his refusal to follow predictable patterns, his ability to absorb pressure without reacting emotionally, his willingness to let subordinates take credit and blame. To Hitler, Eisenhower represented something deeply unsettling, a commander who did not need personal glory. As Allied forces pushed inland, Eisenhower resisted calls for reckless advances. He prioritized logistics, fuel, ammunition, supply lines, the unglamorous details that determined whether armies survived or collapsed. Hitler had seen this before. In World War I, Germany had lost not because it ran out of soldiers, but because it ran out of resources. Eisenhower was recreating that nightmare on a continental scale. Then came the moment Hitler believed could reverse everything. December 1944. The Ardennes. When German forces smashed through the Ardennes forest, Allied lines buckled. American units were surrounded. Panic spread. For a brief moment, it looked like Hitler's last gamble might succeed. Eisenhower did not panic. He did not rush to the front. He did not issue dramatic speeches. Instead, he reorganized the entire Allied front in hours. He shifted command boundaries, redirected reserves, and gave Patton permission to execute one of the fastest operational turns in military history. While Hitler believed he had shattered Allied cohesion, Eisenhower quietly reinforced it. The German offensive stalled, fuel ran out, supplies vanished, German losses mounted. The Ardennes became what Eisenhower had always intended it to be, the last place Germany could afford to lose its strength. Hitler had bet everything on shock. Eisenhower answered with endurance. By early 1945, German commanders understood the truth. They were no longer fighting individual American generals. They were fighting a system, one that Eisenhower controlled completely. Cities fell, rivers were crossed, resistance crumbled, and still Eisenhower refused to gamble. He advanced deliberately, relentlessly, squeezing Germany from every direction at once. Hitler raged. He dismissed generals. He blamed betrayal. He demanded impossible counterattacks. But he never solved the problem at the center of the war. Dwight Eisenhower could not be baited, and the end was now inevitable. By the spring of 1945, the war in Europe was no longer a question of victory, only of control. Berlin was collapsing. German armies were disintegrating. Yet even as the end approached, Eisenhower made a decision that stunned many observers. He halted the American advance east of the Elbe River. His forces could have raced toward Berlin. He chose not to. To critics, it looked like hesitation. To some American commanders, it felt like surrendering glory. Berlin was the ultimate prize. Capturing it would define the war in Europe. Eisenhower refused. He understood what Hitler never did. Wars are not won by cities alone. They are won by preserving alliances and preventing future conflicts. Eisenhower's priority was not the symbolic capture of Berlin, but the destruction of the remaining German armies and the stability of post-war Europe. Hitler watched this with disbelief. He had expected a reckless charge, a final gamble. Instead, Eisenhower tightened the noose. Allied forces advanced methodically, cutting Germany into isolated pockets. Millions of German soldiers surrendered, not to dramatic assaults, but to inevitability. On April 30th, 1945, Adolf Hitler killed himself in Berlin. He never faced Dwight Eisenhower, yet Eisenhower had shaped every major decision that led to his defeat. After the war, captured German officers spoke candidly. They admitted they had feared Patton's speed, Montgomery's confidence, and American industrial power. But Eisenhower unsettled them the most. He could not be provoked. He could not be rushed. He never offered Germany the mistake it needed to survive. He denied Hitler chaos. In retrospect, Eisenhower's genius was invisible to many. There were no dramatic charges to film, no single battlefield to mythologize. His weapon was control over men, resources, time, and ego. That was why Hitler feared him. Eisenhower never fought for headlines. He let others become legends. When mistakes were made, he accepted responsibility. When victories came, he shared the credit. After the war, Eisenhower returned to civilian life, then became President of the United States. His farewell address warned Americans about the dangers of unchecked military power, a lesson shaped by years of commanding the largest war machine in history. The irony was complete. The general who terrified Hitler was not a conqueror, not a warrior obsessed with glory, but a man who understood restraint. History often remembers the loudest voices and the boldest charges. But World War II was decided by a man who spoke softly, planned carefully, and never revealed his fear, because he had none to show. Hitler searched for a battlefield genius. What he found instead was something far more dangerous. A commander who could not be manipulated.